There are several unsettling details in this story, and each of them points towards something far more complicated than it first appears. It is one of those cases that lingers in your mind long after you hear it. You try to piece it together, searching for the missing logic, wondering how any of it could have happened at all. Clues continue to surface even now, yet the case remains unsolved. We begin with Helena, a small city in the state of Montana. For many years, the region depended on mining. Silver and tin were extracted from the surrounding hills, and most residents worked in or around the mines. The town itself was quiet and modest. In the early 80s, it had only 2 hotels, and one of them eventually burned down. What Helena lacked in entertainment, it made up for in landscape. The surrounding area was strikingly beautiful. Dense forests, rolling hills, and streams so clear they looked untouched. It was here, in the early 1980s, that the Marshall family settled after moving from sunny California. Nancy Faye Marshall worked as a waitress. Kim Marshall was studying radio communications, hoping to turn his interest into a profession. Together they were raising 3 children. Nathan, the oldest, was 6. Nyleen was 4. Both were Nancy's children from her first marriage. The youngest, 2-year-old Noreen, was their daughter together. The Marshalls were a close and affectionate family. Kim had married Nancy after her divorce and embraced her children as his own. He even gave them his last name. Nyleen Kay Marshall was born on September 8, 1978, in Orange County, California. Her mother, Nancy, separated from the children's biological father shortly after Nyleen was born and later met Kim Marshall. Their lives were still in California at the time. Both Nancy and Kim were members of the Latter-day Saint Church, and their faith shaped much of their daily life. Little is known about Kim beyond that. He had a deep interest in radio technology and devoted many hours to it. For a period of time he was not working, and Nancy supported the entire family on her modest income from the restaurant where she waited tables. Even so, their home was warm, and their life together appeared steady and loving. Nancy and Kim left the warmth and familiarity of California for the wide, quiet stretches of Montana. Life in Helena moved at a slower pace, and there was little to distract anyone except for the small local radio club. Over time, that club became a place where they found routine, companionship, and eventually, a shared passion. Their interest in radio equipment was not accidental. In many Latter-day Saint communities, a sense of preparedness is woven into daily life. Practical skills, which may seem unusual to outsiders, carry clear value for families who believe in being ready for whatever the future may bring. For the Marshalls, radio communication offered both connection and competence, no matter the circumstances. The historical moment shaped their choices as well. They were living during a tense and uncertain period in American history, when conversations about the Cold War extended far beyond politics. People across the country quietly prepared for possibilities they hoped would never come to pass. In that atmosphere, Kim's dedication to radio work felt less like a hobby and more like an essential skill, something that could provide clarity, or even safety, in a world that seemed to be shifting beneath their feet. This is nearly everything that is known about the couple and their family. We also know that they spent much of their time outdoors. They often took the children on hikes, and the kids learned how to navigate the forest near their home. A national park stretched not far from their neighborhood, with deep woods and dramatic volcanic landscapes. The children knew the basic safety rules, and their parents made sure they understood how to behave in the wilderness. On June 25, 1983, the local amateur radio club invited its members to a small picnic. Families were welcome, so the children could enjoy the woods while the adults talked, shared food, and relaxed in the summer air. 4-year-old Nyleen wore a yellow t-shirt and matching shorts. Yellow was her favourite colour. The entire family, Nathan, little Noreen, Nancy, and Kim, piled into the car and drove to the recreation area south of town. The weather was bright and warm. Sunlight filtered through the trees, and the air carried the scent of early summer. Members of the club settled at the base of a low hill, opened their baskets, and laid out sandwiches and simple snacks. Many children were there that day, some older, some younger. Around 4 in the afternoon, the children asked their parents if they could go down to a small creek nearby. It was close enough to be seen from parts of the picnic area, and the parents agreed, letting them cool their feet in the water. According to some accounts, the children moved back and forth between the creek and the picnic spot throughout the afternoon. The adults believed that because the children stayed together, nothing could truly threaten them. They played within sight, running through the grass, splashing at the water's edge, and returning again to the gathering. They had no reason to imagine that anything could go wrong. But the peaceful rhythm of that summer afternoon did not last. What began as an ordinary picnic in the woods turned into the darkest moment of the Marshalls' life. And it is important to understand that the children were entirely on their own by the creek. The place where the parents set up their picnic was surrounded by rocky slopes and rolling hills, and beyond them lay dense forest. The creek, however, was close enough to feel harmless. The older children had promised to keep an eye on the younger ones, so the group set off on their small adventure without any sense of danger. 4-year-old Nyleen had been lagging behind from the beginning. By 4 in the afternoon, she was tired and reluctant to walk any farther. She settled on a large stone, folded her legs beneath her, and watched the beaver dams across the water. One of the children asked whether she wanted to join them at the creek, but she shook her head. She would wait there until the others came back and pick her up on their way. About 15 minutes later, a girl from the group returned to the stone where Nyleen had been sitting. The rock was empty. She called out for her friend, walked around the clearing, then went back to the creek and wandered along the edge of the woods. There was no sign of the little girl. It was as if she had disappeared between one breath and the next. Soon the rest of the children gathered at the spot. Someone ran to the adults and the message spread quickly. They could not find Nyleen. The parents tried to stay calm. They hoped she had simply wandered off and become confused in the trees. She had gone to the creek barefoot, which worried them. A child without shoes could injure herself or trip over a root. Yet at the same time, they believed she could not have gone far. A 4-year-old barefoot in the forest does not cover much ground. The adults began searching the area where she had last been seen, combing through brush and circling the clearing. Their efforts brought nothing. Realizing that every minute mattered, they called the police. Within an hour, officers and forest rangers arrived. Around 2,800 people joined the search over the next days. Many were members of the same Latter-day Saint congregation the Marshalls attended, and they came without hesitation. The atmosphere was determined and hopeful. People believed the little girl would soon be found safe, perhaps frightened, perhaps exhausted, but alive. A search dog named Duke was brought to the scene. At first, he followed her trail with confidence, but the scent vanished abruptly. This usually happens when a child is lifted from the ground, carried away or placed inside a vehicle. Duke was an experienced dog who had previously located missing children and adults in rugged terrain. He was not known to lose a trail for no reason. The landscape itself made the work almost impossible. Search teams became disoriented in the thick underbrush, and one group even spent the night in the forest after losing their bearings. Their experience revealed just how unforgiving the terrain was. If grown adults could lose their way so easily, it was painful to imagine what might have happened to a 4-year-old child. A helicopter equipped with a thermal camera soon arrived at the site where Nyleen had disappeared. 4 additional search dogs were brought in as well. On the second day, heavy rain swept across the forest and washed away whatever scent or trace might have remained, making the search even more difficult. During the first 10 days, investigators believed the little girl had simply wandered off and lost her way. They did not initially consider the possibility of an abduction, but when they spoke with the children, they learned something unsettling. Two girls, the older of them only 8, told police that a man had tried to speak with them that afternoon. They described him wearing a purple tracksuit. They said they had seen him near Nyleen as well. According to the girls, he and the child exchanged a few words. Nyleen told him something like, "My brother can run faster than you." The man then invited her to play a game he called Catch the Shadow, a name the girls had never heard before. Until that moment, everyone had viewed the disappearance as a tragic accident in the woods. A child vanishes while no one is looking, leaving no footprints, no sound, no direction. The dogs lose the trail, and there are no calls for help. But once the children mentioned the stranger, the circumstances began to look very different. At first, the girls assumed the man was simply one of the parents from the picnic, which is why they did not mention him immediately. Even today, some people question their account, suggesting the children imagined the encounter. Yet there is no reason for them to lie, and no benefit to inventing such a story. If this stranger truly had been in the forest, finding him now would be far more difficult. By the time the first girl spoke up, 5 days had already passed, and during all those days the possibility of abduction had not been considered at all. Search teams moved through the forest in organised grids, marking each cleared section with ribbons tied to the trees. Their work was careful and exhaustive. Yet after 10 days, the search was suspended. The weather had turned harsh, and no trace of the child had been found. Photographs of smiling Nyleen appeared everywhere, on billboards, on flyers, even on plastic shopping bags across Montana and beyond. Her face became familiar not only to the people of Helena, but to families across the country. Life in the town continued its unhurried pace, though nothing felt normal for the Marshall family. Days stretched into weeks, and weeks gathered into months. A year passed. Through it all, the family held on to the hope that she might somehow come home, or that someone, somewhere, would find her. To cope with the weight of uncertainty and loss, Nancy and Kim created a small foundation dedicated to the training of search and rescue dogs. They understood that not every police dog was suited for wilderness searches. Many were trained to detect narcotics or explosives, not to track a missing child through thick forest. Through their foundation, they not only found a way to stay occupied and regain some sense of purpose, but also helped in the search for other missing people. While the search continued, investigators brought in a specialist who practiced hypnosis. He interviewed several adults who had been at the picnic, guiding them through their memories in the hope that something overlooked might rise to the surface. During those sessions, he asked them to recall every unfamiliar face, every moment that seemed out of place. Composite sketches were created from the descriptions, but none of them offered any real progress. Then, in 1985, the case took an unexpected turn. At the national centre that assisted in locating missing children, the phone rang. The operator answered, and a man's voice spoke a single sentence. "Nyleen is with me." He said she was alive and safe. Before the operator could respond, the caller hung up. The call came from a payphone rather than a home line, and for a brief moment, it seemed as if the investigation might surge forward, but the trail ended as quickly as it began. All the investigators could do was wait. 2 months later, an envelope arrived at the police station. There was no return address. The letter had been typed on a typewriter, most likely to conceal the author's handwriting. It read, "I did not want them to pressure her for information. All I can say is that she is fine. I hope Childfind can deliver this message to her family. I found her by the roadside near the Elkhorn Mountains, between Helena and Boulder. She was crying and frightened. I picked her up. She was trembling. I decided to keep her with me and love her as my own. I brought her home. I have a good income from investments. I work from home, so we spend all our time together. I teach her, and she enjoys travelling with me. Her hair is short and curly now. She has grown. She is about 115 centimeters tall and weighs about 23 kilograms. Her 4 upper front teeth and 2 lower front teeth have come in. She bathes and brushes her teeth every day. She eats well. Her favorite food is pizza, and she likes cherry cola. She will happily tell you about our trips to San Francisco, New York, Oklahoma City, New Orleans, Nashville, Chicago, Puerto Rico, and Canada. We even spent a month in Britain last year, and she loved it. Our passports never raise questions. More letters followed. She does not know what this mixture is or where it comes from, but every morning I bring it to her in the bathroom. It is a spoonful of my medication and hers. It does not affect her in any harmful way. I have never touched her in any improper manner. She is a sweet child, and because I love her so deeply, I understand how much her family must miss her. But she has grown used to our life, and she seems content. She trusts me and shows no fear. We play often, and she laughs when I act silly. She smiles shyly when I tease her, and she giggles when we sit close together. Sometimes she hugs me without any reason at all. I love her. She is mine. I cannot let her go. These letters became the first serious lead the investigators had hoped for. It was eventually determined that they had been mailed from Madison. The phone call had come from the same region. Soon afterward, a girl resembling Nyleen was reported at a restaurant in Janesville, but officers were unable to locate her. Finding the child, or the person who claimed to have taken her, seemed nearly impossible. What stood out to you in those letters? Many people who follow this case point to details beyond the disturbing line about the spoon. Some believe the letters sound as if they were written by someone with no real connection to the disappearance. The anonymous writer described the girl with unnerving precision, as if he had studied height and weight charts for 6-year-olds, rather than observed a real child. In discussions on forums, people note that such detailed descriptions resemble the fantasies of offenders, rather than lived reality. And there is another question. If the man and the girl had travelled across the United States and beyond its borders, as the writer claimed, how did no one notice them? Cases like the abduction of Sally Horner demonstrate that eventually, someone, somewhere, sees what others have missed. A child who appears out of place. A man whose behaviour raises quiet suspicion. In 1990, a segment about Nyleen aired on the well-known television programme Unsolved Mysteries. At the end of the broadcast, the journalists urged anyone with even the smallest piece of information to come forward. The call could be anonymous. Shortly afterward, the newsroom received a phone call from a group of students in Washington. They claimed that one of their classmates matched the description of the missing girl. The report energized the investigators. Officers went to the school, spoke with her classmates and teachers, and contacted the girl's father. They discovered that her documents were forged. And then came the shock. The child they had found was indeed a kidnapped girl, but not Nyleen Marshall. Her name was Monica Bonilowski. She had been missing, and her mother had nearly abandoned hope of ever seeing her again. Monica was reunited with her family, and the discovery brought relief to at least one grieving parent. The mystery of Nyleen's disappearance, however, remained unsolved. Still, her case had indirectly brought another child home. Years continued to pass. In 1991, the Marshalls received a glimmer of hope, though one shadowed by fear. A man with a criminal record, Richard James Wilson, came to the police and confessed. He claimed he had taken Nyleen and murdered her, along with another woman. He said he had done it on the day the girl vanished, and had left her body in an abandoned mine near the recreation area where the family had been spending the afternoon. Detectives took his confession seriously. Wilson had a previous conviction for a sexual offence and was on probation at the time. In 1983, Richard Wilson was indeed living in Helena. Investigators asked him to lead them to the place he described. Officers excavated the abandoned mine he indicated, but no human remains were found. Detectives continued their inquiry, searching for any detail that might support his confession. When they confirmed that nothing connected him to the disappearance, they released him. There were other figures who drew attention, though none became true suspects. Rumours circulated that a couple at the picnic that day resembled composite sketches of child abductors wanted in another state. A relative, either a grandfather or an uncle, had supposedly recognised the sketch on television and called the police, reporting that he had seen similar-looking people during the first days of the search. Unfortunately, that was all he could offer. With so little to go on, investigators could not develop the lead, and it faded like so many others. In 1994, the Marshall family moved to Japan after Kim's job required relocation. While they were living abroad, the family received a call from investigators back in Montana. Human remains had been found in the same forest where Nyleen had vanished. For the Marshalls, it offered a painful kind of hope, the possibility of finally burying their daughter, of closing a chapter that had never stopped hurting. But after a detailed examination, the truth emerged. The remains were not human. They belonged to a bear. The disappointment hit the family with crushing force. Over the years, they had endured so many rises and falls, so many moments when hope gave way to the same unanswered question. Where was their little girl? After Japan, the Marshalls were scheduled to relocate again, this time to Mexico in 1995. It was there that something deeply disturbing occurred. Nancy Marshall, Nyleen's mother, was found dead in a hotel. At first, detectives concluded that she had taken her own life. But as the investigation continued, the circumstances began to look very different. She had clearly been harmed before she died. Her hands were tied behind her back. There were indications that she had been mistreated. The door to her hotel room showed signs of being forced. What initially seemed straightforward soon appeared far more complex, suggesting that her death required a much closer investigation. Everything at the scene indicated that her death had not been self-inflicted. In Mexico, Nancy had been entirely alone. She had travelled there to find housing for her family before their move. Now she is officially considered a victim of homicide, and many people close to the Marshalls say they never believed the early explanation of suicide. The family was forced to learn how to live not only without their daughter and sister, but now without their mother as well. Tragedy had struck them a second time, and if Nancy had indeed been killed, the person responsible had never been identified or brought to justice. In 1997, the case of Nyleen Marshall took an unexpected turn. A 19-year-old pregnant woman arrived at a hospital in New Orleans, far from the forests of Montana. She told the staff she had almost no knowledge of her past. She knew nothing about her early medical history or any hereditary conditions in her family. Doctors asked if she could remember the names of her parents. She said that she believed her mother's name might have been Nyleen. It was a striking detail. The name was extremely rare in the United States. What were the chances that she had recalled it by accident? Perhaps she had heard it as a child. Perhaps it had belonged to her mother. Or perhaps, impossible as it seemed, it was her own. She introduced herself as Helena, and the coincidence deepened. Helena was also the name of the city where the Marshalls had lived when Nyleen disappeared. Another unsettling detail emerged. The young woman had not come to the hospital alone. A man whose identity was never confirmed accompanied her, and before the baby was born, the pair abruptly left, disappearing from the facility without explanation. Police immediately began searching for her. Her age matched what Nyleen's would have been. Officers eventually located the young woman and collected a DNA sample, a blood specimen, so that it could be compared with any surviving material from the Marshall family. The process was far from simple. Kim had not been Nyleen's biological father. Her mother was no longer alive. The only usable reference sample was one Nancy had provided at the very beginning of the case. But time had damaged it. The storage conditions were poor, and the DNA had degraded significantly. Experts needed months to prepare and analyse it. At last, after a long and exhausting wait, the results were finalised. There was no genetic match. The young woman named Helena was not Nyleen Marshall. Years passed, and the mystery remained. Then, in 2018, another unusual lead appeared. Several business owners in Wisconsin received envelopes postmarked from Cincinnati. Inside were age-progressed photographs of Nyleen, images created to show what she might look like decades after her disappearance, along with a postcard that read, "Missing, Nyleen Marshall." Police were notified, but the sender has never been identified, and the purpose behind the letters remains unknown. And so the last fragile thread of hope unravelled. Today, Nyleen would be nearly 50 years old. Many age-progressed images have been created, each imagining what she might look like as an adult. They are released in the hope that someone, somewhere, a neighbour, a nurse at a hospital, a fellow traveller on a bus, might recognise the face of the girl who vanished so long ago. No one can say what truly happened to her that day. Perhaps she did become lost in the forest and fell into one of the abandoned shafts scattered through the hills. Or perhaps someone dangerous had been in those woods. A man searching for a vulnerable child, watching for a moment when she would be alone. She had been very young, trusting, unafraid of strangers. If he had approached her with a game, lifted her into his arms and disappeared into the trees, the dogs would never have found her trail again. There is another possibility, that Nyleen had known the person who took her. Someone familiar. Someone connected to the family or to the radio club. Statistics show that in most abductions, the child recognises the abductor. It is difficult to dismiss that entirely. Some viewers have speculated about Kim, or more precisely, questioned why little is known about his early life. People ask about his employment, which seemed uncertain at the time. He was studying, then suddenly his work required international transfers, first to Japan, then to Mexico. He rarely appeared in documentaries about the case, and there are very few photographs of him. But even this theory falters when examined closely. If Kim had left the picnic, someone would have noticed. If he had returned carrying a child, someone would have seen it. And the official investigation never found evidence pointing to him. The case of Nyleen Marshall has been classified as cold for many years. There have been no breakthroughs, no significant leads, and no discoveries that bring the story any closer to resolution. Yet investigators have not abandoned hope. They believe that someone, somewhere, may know the truth, and that one day, that person may come forward. What do you think happened that afternoon? Why did the children wait until the 5th day to mention the man in the purple tracksuit? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please leave a like to support this video. We will meet again very soon. Subscribe so you do not miss the next story. Have a peaceful night, and take care.